Welcome back, YouTube family. I know that y'all need some deep healing. I'm Kamara. If you are new to the channel, this channel is about all things healing. I am a healer. My life has basically become dedicated to healing myself and healing others. I'm a certified massage therapist. I focus in myofascial release and trigger point therapy, emotional release therapy as well. And today we are talking about hypermobility syndrome. So all of you people who are like, ooh, look what I can do, and you like overextend your arms and do all kind of crazy things with your body, I'm gonna be talking to y'all today. So basically, hypermobility syndrome is a genetic condition. So you really can't escape it. Like, it's passed down. You either got it or you don't have it, and it's associated with having weak postural muscles. So we'll talk about basically how you strengthen your postural muscles, you help your hypermobility syndrome. And then hypermobility syndrome is like super duper overlooked. Excuse me. Super overlooked by clinicians because most clinicians are trained to look for a decrease in range of motion, whereas hypermobility syndrome is really associated with more of an increase in range of motion, or like an overextension. So this would be flexion, this would be extension. So I extend at a normal rate. A hypermobile will extend far beyond that. My daughter is a hypermobile, and her whole childhood, and you have kids do this all the time where they're like, hey, look what I can do, and then they do that weird thing where you can see their arm pop out, and I would constantly tell her, like, look, I know you think this is cool now, but you are causing yourself long-term pain. So some signs and symptoms that you may be I call it, a hypermobile, or you may have hypermobility syndrome, is you'll have pain in the knees, your fingers, your hips, your elbows. Basically, you're gonna have pain in your joints. Also, if you're hypermobile, you may have more, sprains and dislocations. My god sister, and I love you, Brittany. My god sister used to break her arm like every summer, and of course, when you break a bone, it's easier to re-injure and break that same bone, right? Because it's just weakened right there. So, but hypermobiles will have more sprains and more like dislocations than the average person. Also, hypermobiles are more prone to have scoliosis. It's just more frequent, and this can lead to having back pain. So the way to basically establish if you have hypermobility syndrome or not, I think you kind of know if you got it, if you are overextending, you're hypermobile. But there's not really an established standard of how much like ligamentous laxity causes hypermobility syndrome, but there is something called the Baden criteria, or it's like the Baden hypermobility score. So if you have a score, it's basically a 9-point scoring system. So if you're like a 4 to 9, then you're considered hypermobile, basically. So there's like a series of tests that they go through, and they're basically gonna just test your joints to see, if you're overextending in the joints. So hypermobility affects children more than it affects adults. It's common in about 10 to 15% of children and about 5% of adults. And then it also decreases with time. So an individual who may have been a hypermobile as a child may lose that hypermobility as they come into adulthood. I love tea. So hypermobility is also more common in women than it is men, more common in Asians than it is blacks, and then more blacks than whites. So it's kind of like that's like a hierarchy, I guess, if you were to talk about hypermobility. So hypermobiles do not like to be in static positions for a long term. This is super problematic for a hypermobile. So let's say you work at a job where you are, standing or something, or sitting for a long time. So let's say you are a dentist, or someone who works at a call center, or someone where you're sitting at a desk all day. Hypermobiles really don't like to be static. They like to move around. Their joints are already, it's almost like, it's not like they're loose, but they kind of are. Think of it as like having loose joints. So I would always tell my daughter, like I said, you're hypermobile, like don't do certain things. She just recently broke her arm. What did she do? She fooshed. So foosh is what we call fall on outstretched hands. So it's when you fall and you try to catch yourself like this. And when you do that, and you're hypermobile, you can easily overextend. So she basically bent her arm all the way back and then broke her arm right on the radius and the ulna. So, you hypermobiles really have to be careful with what you're doing. So for treatment for hypermobility syndrome, you can do trigger point therapy. Hit me up. Hit up your girl, or find someone in your area who does trigger point therapy. You can also do trigger point injections, and then ultrasound can also help. Now, with these muscles, like people who are already hypermobile, you should be strengthening your muscles, not lengthening your muscles. So I don't want to say like don't do yoga, because you shouldn't be excluded from yoga just because you're hypermobile. Just be aware that you want to be strengthening more than lengthening, because lengthening is just going to cause you more excuse me, it's going to cause you more issues than what you started with. And then for massage therapists, if you're working with a hypermobile, you're going to want to do like deep stripping massage techniques, or trigger point therapy for them, where you're just sitting, in a trigger point until it deactivates, so do ischemic compression, basically sit in that trigger point. You don't want to be stretching them more, because you're just going to add to the issue that they already have. Some associated conditions with hypermobility syndrome is there's a rare condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and that's just it's a rare condition, but there's like a weakness in your connective tissues. So that's something that can be confused with hypermobility syndrome. Hypermobility syndrome is also associated with people who have Down syndrome and Marfan syndrome. Hypermobility syndrome can lead to joint pain, damaged cartilage, or arthritis. So it's really something that, you just want to be careful of. So hypermobiles, people who have hypermobile kids, like when they start showing you this, look at me and look how I can overextend my joints, you don't want to encourage that behavior. It can be damaging long term for the body. And then y'all know those guys, I can't remember that MTV like dance show, but you had those guys, and I think they toured. They probably still go on tour with certain people, but they do, it's like a group of black men, and they like do all this crazy stuff and are like, hyperextending and overextending their joints. Like, that's cool, but hey, y'all hit me up. I know y'all have made some bread on tour, so, let me help y'all, because it's issues. So that's hypermobiles. For my hypermobiles out there, be careful. Hopefully you guys learned something from this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and go ahead and hit that little notification bell so that you get the alert when I drop new videos. I appreciate my audience and your viewership, and until next time, keep healing.